this is the agenda. We will start first by looking into the 3 different categories of ExFlow coding rules, followed by a walkthrough in Business Central, and then a short summary, and then eventually the Q&A then. So the 3 different categories of coding rules in ExFlow are the following. So when you started using ExFlow, whether it was a long time ago or recently, the default coding rules were set up in your system, and the coding rules are used as a way to control what the users can and cannot do on the lines on the web where they approve, for example, invoices. It could also be if they do it in Business Central, but the most common is that they approve their documents on the web. And the users need to have a minimum authorization level in the web permission role to be able to approve and, for example, then change coding. So to be able to change coding, they need to have one of these permission roles. You can see there are 4 different roles. The first one is the approver, and the approver can approve, reject, and set document on hold. The other ones can do a little bit more. So they need to be at least the approver with power permission role to be able to add or change coding, for example, GL accounts or dimensions and so on. So the 3 different categories then. First, you have the ExFlow general coding rules. These are rarely touched, like these are the basics. However, use the other 2 instead, like don't use those, because with the user coding rules, for example, you can set filters for things like GL accounts, dimensions, and so on. And with the user coding rules, you specify what a user can do. So you give permission on what they are allowed to do. And the user coding rules, those are used per user, per company. You can have multiple rules, but you only set 1 per user per company. And then you have the ExFlow denying coding rules. And these can be used, like when you set it up, you can use it for everyone within the company, or you can specify in the settings for that rule if it should apply to a user or a different group. And with denying coding rules, you specify what the user is not allowed to do. So for example, it can be a combination of values. Let's say that if you use a dimension, you're only allowed to use a certain amount of accounts and so on. And you can set up multiple denying coding rules per company. So let's jump into BC right away. Okay, so to find these, you can do a search. You don't have to write the full name, for example, ExFlow. You can see here that I only used EXF, for example, to find what you're looking for. And these are the 3 that I mentioned. I will not talk about the general coding rules today, but I will talk about the other 2. So let's start by looking at the user coding rules. When you want to create a new one, you click on New up here. I will not do that now. Let's start looking at an example, because when you set up a new user coding rule, the only things you have to fill out is the name and then click active, like the button here, and then add the auto coding rule lines. When you do the ExFlow denying coding rules, then you have to fill out a little bit more. So I will show you that, but for this one, it's fairly simple. So in this example, you give the user permission to change in all of the column on all line level. So this is the most common setting to have. And then you can, for example, set up a deny encoding rule if you want to be a little more strict. But this is the most common setting to have. If you want to see what users that has this coding rule applied on them, you click on related functions and then show connected users. Then you will get this list. So for example, these are the users that I have to have this coding rule on at least one of the companies on them. Let's look at another example. For example, in this coding rule, the users can make changes on the lines except for 2 of them. So for the geo account here, the users are only allowed to use accounts within this range. And then on department here, they're only allowed to use two dimensions, admin and prod. And then the next example, here you have the GL accounts again, so they are only allowed to use the accounts within this range, and then changes on all other here. To keep in mind, when you set like accounts like this, if the user now will search for something within the 3000 range, for example, they will not see anything. Nothing will come up on the web. They will only see the accounts within the range that you set. So those are a few examples on how you can work with user coding rules. Let's go to the user card to see where you set this. So I will go to this user. So this is the company this user has. So the web permission role you can see here, this user has super, so it can make changes among other things. But here you see the user coding rule ID number. So here you set what rule they should have for that. Let's see. Let's look at the ExFlow deny encoding rules then. When you set up a new rule, so let's see how it looks like if you would do that. You click on new and you will get this. So you can see it's a little bit more to fill out. So you start by filling out the name of the rule, and then you click on the button active down here. If you want to, later on, you might not want this active anymore, but you want to save it for later, just click it again and it will be deactivated. So that's good to know if you want to deactivate it for a while and then use it again. You also have an option here, rule 4. And the rule can apply for all kinds of documents, or you can choose here. I do not think that you guys can see the scroll down menu here because of a bug in Microsoft, but it says that you can use it for all, quote, invoice, credit, or order. So you can specify the rule per, for example, invoice. So you can make several ones, and maybe you want it only for invoices. And then you can also specify from amount to amount, and then from line amount to line amount. So you can say that this coding rule only applies when the invoice is between these amounts, for example. And then on validation message, here you write the message that shows up if a user is not following this rule. So I will show you in an example soon how that looks like. And then, as I said, when you create a deny encoding rule, it applies to everyone within the company. So if you wanted to only apply for a certain approval group or person, you have to click here and add that group. And then you also have the option to choose if it should apply for final approver only. So if you only want this rule to be for the last person in the invoice flow, then you click here. So let's go back and look at a few examples. Here you have a denying coding rule. It's active and the rule is for all documents. Here you see the validation message. So you could say, call it a warning message online. So if the user would not follow this, this is the message that will pop up on the screen. So fields cannot be left empty, for example. And in this rule, we have ticked these buttons down here. And if you apply this to a user, then the user is not allowed to leave these fields empty when approving documents. In the next example, you can see here, it's for invoice. And for example, if you send out documents to the approvers with, some people call it a dummy account, we call it a predefined account. So in this case, the account is 7590. Then if you do that, send out that, then this setting does not allow the user to approve document with that account. So it's indirect forces the user to set another account, for example. And you set the predefined account under ExFlow setup. The next example, if you, for example, are working with ExFlow re-invoicing, this is a good setting to have. So when you work with re-invoicing, there are 4 columns that you use. This column is the customer ID, what customer it is, and then you have the amount that should be re-invoiced. So in this example, if you send out an invoice to your approvers and you add the customer on that, then this rule says that they are not allowed to leave the amount box empty. So then the validation message that the user will see is specify re-invoicing amount if they would do that. And then last example here. This example is if the users would use any of these accounts, then they are not allowed to leave this dimension empty. Avdelning, it means department. So they're not allowed to leave this dimension empty. So then they have to set a value. Yeah, so those are a few examples. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So to summarize everything, there are 3 different coding rules that you can choose from. The ExFlow general coding rules are the basics, you could say. Then you have the ExFlow user coding rules, which is what the user is allowed to do. And then with ExFlow denying coding rules, you set what the user is not allowed to do. We have some more information about this on our online manual that you can check out, or you can contact your support if you want more information, or if you want to look into your coding rules and get some more help with that, for example.